Talk 105.9 WMAL. Coming up, Jared Nitzler joins us. He's a high school student at Woodgrove High School in Loudoun County. He was suspended because he refused to wear a mask, and now he's unsuspended because the people his parents voted for, probably, fought for his rights. And now he can go back to school. He went back to school today. No mask on. How awesome is that? He'll join us at the bottom of the hour. I have to point this out before we get to our next great guest, the Attorney General of Virginia. The news has come out that the State of the Union will be full capacity on March 1st. As I predicted, the State of the Union set to be full capacity. The administration pretending like they've conquered COVID and this is the result of their great work. All the pieces are coming into place. So another one. Check another one off the old prediction boxes there, right there. Boom, got it. All right. So enough of that. Enough tooting my own horn. Let's talk to the Attorney General of Virginia, Jason Miyares, who joins us now. Mr. Attorney General, great to have you with us.
Vince, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be with you.
Great to talk to you. A lot of progress made by you and your colleagues there in Richmond this week to restore the rights to parents as that Governor Youngkin signs into law immediately the ability for parents to make these decisions for their kids, whether or not they're masked. But one of the things that I thought was interesting is Governor Youngkin said yesterday and then again today on WMAL this morning on O'Connor and Company that he hopes that there's not going to be any more legal challenges over any of this. But the ACLU of Virginia immediately jumped in and tweeted out, "We'll see you in court, Governor Youngkin." What do you make of this? The ACLU is refusing to back down. They're once again fighting against civil liberties.
We're ready. Anybody, whether it's the ACLU, any far-left special interest group, or a school board that has decided they're going to ignore parents' wishes, we'll see you in court. We're going to defend the legislation, the bipartisan legislation that was signed into law yesterday quite vigorously. We defended the governor's executive order. We got a big win in Loudoun County yesterday. And so, that was a pretty dramatic moment. We submitted a host of affidavits to the court just detailing the suspensions and how children have been really punished and really, in many ways, used as political pawns in some ways during this process, have been punished. And the point that I've made to people is, listen, our children have not had a normal life since 2019. It's time to give them back their lives. It's time to give them a normal life. The science shows that if you're wearing an N95 mask, it does not matter whether the person you're talking to is wearing one as well. It takes away the entire argument, which is for me to be properly protected, both parties have to wear masks. Science does not show that anymore. 2 years ago, perhaps the N95 masks were not widely available. They are widely available now through the administration. And so let's get our kids back to a normal life. Let's empower parents. Parents are the best to know what's best for their children. If you're a parent, you want your child to wear a mask for 6, 7, 8 hours a day, that is great. That's your right. But if you're a parent that has a child with, say, asthma, or if you're a parent that has came to me and said, my daughter used to be an all-A student and now she's a mostly C student because she wears glasses and wearing a mask every day has made school what was once a joy miserable, you get to make the best decision. But, we have created a mental health crisis for our kids. They have really been through so much, have not, as I said, not had a normal life since 2019. I had one parent who shared with me that their 9-year-old daughter was ecstatic because for the very, very first time, she was going to be able to see what her best friend at school actually looked like. Oh. Think about that ramification. Think about what we've put our kids through the last 2 years. The science shows it's okay. Let's give them a normal life. And we're going to be on the side of parents and kids in this process. We're proud to do so.
Tell me what I should make of the sequence of events yesterday, because Glenn Youngkin signs into law this law that requires Virginia schools make these masks optional immediately. He says, look, we're not going to enforce it until March 1st, but immediately the kids really do have this option. These families have these options. And then you get Loudoun County comes out and said, okay, sure thing. Next week, we'll let the kids take the masks off if they want to. Next week, they say. And then within an hour or so, then a judge comes out and goes, no, not next week. Immediately. tomorrow, and that is today, Thursday, these kids have that option. What was Loudoun County attempting to do?
Yeah. Well, what was going on? You had two parallel tracks. You know, Governor Youngkin, within an hour of us being sworn in, we were on the third floor of Mr. Jefferson's Capitol in Richmond, where the governor signed a series of executive orders which said parents have an option. And so the case yesterday in Loudoun was actually defending the governor's executive order. Parallel to that, we obviously always had a backup plan, which was a legislative fix that was codified in the Code of Virginia. But we want to absolutely litigate this. And to get your viewers a perspective, we had multiple challenges to governor's executive orders a year and 2 years ago, and Ralph Northam, through the stroke of a pen, through an executive order, was using executive order power, which under Virginia law is pretty broad if you determine there's a pandemic or other emergency powers. He used those executive orders to shut down schools, shut down churches, shut down private businesses, and even mandated masks. And so what we were arguing is, listen, the Code of Virginia gives the governor some pretty broad emergency powers, and that includes he has a right to adjust the mask mandate. We had an Arlington judge who disagreed with us. Probably not surprised that it was in Arlington, but we were also litigating in multiple other areas, and we thought it was important that to go forward with that with a Loudoun judge. That was the judge's ruling. What was so satisfying in all of that, though, Vince, was the judge also put in his order that if you're a child and you're suspended during this period of time by these school administrators, that in his order it says that your record is scrubbed, your academic record is scrubbed of any and all suspensions due to the mask issue. And I can tell you that there were parents and those that were in court that were openly weeping and visibly moved. And so many of them finally felt like somebody was their voice. They felt like they've been belittled. They felt like they've been ignored. They felt like the mainstream media treated them like them. They were the enemy just because as parents, they were trying to make the best decision for their own child. And so it was a very satisfying win. We were elated. And any school board that thinks they are going to defy the legislation that was signed into law yesterday will definitely be in court. I'm not sure what maneuver the ACLU is going to be ready, but I have full confidence our team is going to be meeting them head on, and we're not afraid.
Good for that judge. And by the way, we are going to talk to a high school student in Loudoun County in just minutes here, Jared Missler, who was the beneficiary of that judge's move to have that record expunged, and saying no, that you shouldn't have to carry the burden of these awful decisions from this school board forward into your life and your career as you move ahead. Mr. Attorney General Jason Miyares is with us, of course. You mentioned a moment ago that, under Ralph Northam, it was so easy for him to invoke emergency powers, yet it seems it was so difficult for the Youngkin administration to restore liberty. Does that suggest that Virginia law needs to be changed in any meaningful way? Because if the bias is for emergency powers and not for liberty, that sounds like a very broken system.
It is, and so the governor's executive powers, and all these were granted well before I was in the legislature. I got elected in 2015, and then got elected to Attorney General. So these were emergency powers granted to the governor well before I ever joined the General Assembly. But the idea was always, if there was a natural disaster, i.e. a hurricane, a major flooding event, a tornado, an earthquake, something along those lines, that, we have a part-time legislature. The General Assembly meets 60 days a year, and the idea was that when the governor makes these declarations, he has pretty broad authority to tackle it. What Governor Northam did, there was a Democratic one-party far-left control in Richmond. They controlled the state Senate. They controlled the state House. And when the pandemic hit, the governor used these emergency powers that were written for governors, and he eventually extended it, never called the General Assembly back into session. Republicans time and time again introduced legislation that would say the governor has to call the General Assembly back into session. If I recall, the legislation said within 30 days of declaring a state of emergency and exercising these emergency powers to get General Assembly to sign off. Every one of those bills never got a hearing. Every one of those bills died in committee. And so, unfortunately, that's there. And as you know, we still have a state Senate that's controlled by the other party. And so, candidly, we don't see that reforming those powers is going to be anytime soon. They should be reformed. I think it was astonishing to see the level of and how the courts upheld it. the fact that this is the birthplace of the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom, authored by, really the genius of that was Thomas Jefferson, and then ushered into the House of Delegates through then James Madison. And the fact that we're the birthplace of the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom would then have, through the stroke of a pen, shutting down churches and places of worship. And we could say you could go to your grocery store and get a loaf of bread, but you're not allowed to go to your church and get your daily bread of life. I just thought that was astonishing. Candidly, really shocked that the courts did not find that troubling. Probably tells you we need, smart folks on the bench that actually believe in constitutional liberty. But
yes.
Regardless, it needs to be reformed. I absolutely agree with it. But at the end of the day, these are the powers the governor has. I think Governor Youngkin wisely saw that what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If you're going to say the governor has this broad authority to impose a mask mandate,
yes,
then you also have to say the governor has the broad authority to adjust the mask mandate. And we're grateful that for the win yesterday in court.
Attorney General Miyares, help me understand the status of the state of emergency in Virginia, because Governor Northam, before he left, it was the 10th of January, he had extended the state of emergency for 30 days. It sounds like we're out of that window, but what is the status there, and what role does that play in robbing people of their liberties?
My understanding is we still are. I think it is wrapping up rather soon. I think we are seeing that, luckily, I've said before, the Omicron cases, the media is about 4 to 5 days behind what we're seeing with the data, not surprisingly, in some ways. But the Omicron variant, the cases are plummeting. That is a great thing. For example, on the vaccine mandate, I'm pro-vaccine, get vaccinated, but everybody needs to make that choice. That's why I felt like you make that decision on your own. I think we are finding a return to normalcy, as you noted in your lead-in. The State of the Union address is going to be a packed house. I think most people recognize it. I think, for me, probably the most astonishing thing about the threat to liberty is that the bill to restore parent control over whether their child is masked or not in school, it did have some bipartisan support in the state Senate, but it passed on a party line vote in the state House. So think about this. You had Democratic governors in New Jersey, in Delaware, in Connecticut, in Nevada, multiple Democratic governors all over the country that have said, we're not going to mask our kids anymore. We're going to give parents that option. And even with that, you've had Democrats in the House of Delegates decide on a party line vote that they're going to take away those rights of parents and they're going to put it in the hands of administrators. And that should tell you all you need to know right now
yes.
about who values the input of parents and who doesn't.
But those Democrats are not just making that decision because that's what they're for. They're being pressured by interest groups in Virginia. The Virginia Education Association is leaning very heavily into these Democrats, and that's why you're seeing these nonsensical positions.
Oh, yeah, and it goes, listen, the Code of Virginia says that parents have a fundamental right to the upbringing and education of their child. And every time I hear a far-left administrator or somebody, far-left teachers union individual says, hey, we know what's best for your child. We know as much for your child as you do. I always want to ask them, okay, what are my children's names? What are their hobbies? What's their favorite meal? When's their birthday? I mean, obviously, these are things they don't know. And so each individual parent knows what is best for their child. They can make those decisions. And, we're now going into year 3 in this pandemic. Let's start treating people like adults. Let's start treating people like adults. Anybody that wants a vaccine in this country can get one, and they can get one for free. Anyone who wants an N95 mask can get one in this country, and it can be provided for them. We're at a stage right now that we need to give our children back a normal life. We need to empower our parents, treat people like adults. And I think people are ready to get back to a sense of normalcy. We're going to stand with parents, and the other side isn't. And that's kind of really, it's been a stark contrast on maybe the other side pays lip service. We don't. We're going to treat parents like adults and recognize they know their child much better than I ever could, and we're going to let them make those decisions on their own.
It's the first mandate in good governance in the United States of America. Treat the voters like the adults. This is very simple stuff. But somehow it's gotten complicated. Jason Miyares, Virginia's Attorney General, thank you very much. Great to talk to you, sir. Congrats again.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, it's 5:21 now. Let's check in with Ed Rodriguez in the Hot